Technology, of course, is a major aspect of this issue. As Dr. Murthy, when he was Surgeon General in his 2023 report said, which our organizations were very much involved with, technology can be a double-edged sword. For older adults, maybe a positive thing in some circumstances. For younger folks, I think are all painfully aware of some of the negative aspects of social media. I think from our perspective, we want to align science with the intervention. And that's the idea of these two organizations working together, and what leads us to our fireside chat today, titled Technology and Public Policy, How Innovative Tech Solutions Build Connection and Reduce Loneliness. Ryan Elza, who will be our moderator, is a national leader in innovation and technology and social impact, with a strong focus on housing, health, and social care policy. He is the CEO of Stratovation Labs, what a cool name, a social innovation consulting firm whose mission is to partner with public and private sector change makers to design, scale, and sustain evidence-based, human-centered solutions that bridge gaps across a whole range of areas in social care. And our speaker today is Dr. Paolo Narciso. He is the co-founder of People Care AI and a social entrepreneur and technologist dedicated to combating isolation through innovative human-centered solutions. This is going to be a fantastic discussion. Dr. Narciso also serves on the board of the Foundation for Social Connection. Gentlemen, come up and join me here at the podium.
Scary. I know, right? No, we'll be having a really intimate conversation here with you all. So I'm really excited for such an important topic. And I think Representative Ami really set us up well. Introducing ChatGPT, right? Like, who hasn't been to a conference or a session in which someone hasn't pulled out ChatGPT drafted remarks? I think the way that AI technology is really rapidly changing every aspect of our life is just astounding, and the pace of development is only increasing. So I think today's conversation is really important, and also really important to really think about how technology can be a catalyst for human connection and not a substitute for connection. And I'm excited to be joined by Paolo for this important conversation, because we actually go way back to our tenure at AARP Foundation during my time leading their social connection work. But we had a lot of fun exploring emerging technologies, looking at smart speakers, voice-first solutions, looking at virtual reality, early days of chatbots. So we've had a lot of different experiences in really understanding the potential of technology, but also really trying to understand the human elements of technology and technology interaction. Really trying to understand that you both need access to the technology, right? You need the ability to have internet-enabled devices in order to use it. You need to have the education and capacity and training and support to be able to adopt technology. And then you really need that problem that's being solved, right? And a lot of what also influences technology as we think about it are the business models and the dynamics around it. So I think those are all elements that will come up in today's conversation. So we're going to really kind of explore this conversation through three main topics. First, we're going to talk about some of the trends that we've already alluded to. Second, we're going to talk about measuring success in technology and how the measurements of success and those types of metrics can influence the design of technology, both for positive social connection, but also reinforcing negative behaviors. And third, we're going to talk about some of the policy opportunities that we could think about in moving technology in a healthier direction for facilitating connection and belonging. With that, I would love to kind of turn it over to you, Paolo, just for you to kind of introduce yourself and peoplecare.ai and a little bit about your background.
Sure. First of all, just a warning. Last time Ryan and I were on the stage together, there were bad things happened. No one got injured, but mics did in fact fly all over the audience. Hopefully it doesn't happen this time around. I think I fell coming up the stage as well. So luckily there are no steps this time around. I'm Paolo Narciso. I co-founded a company called People Care AI. We focus on helping patients with rare disease be able to access healthcare here in the United States, and specifically not just the health aspects of managing rare disease, but also the financial aspects of it, being able to help those who suffer with rare disease and their caregivers to be able to afford and pay for the care that they need, and also take away some of the administrative burden. And we do it all using AI. So that is the work that we do today. And you know, rare disease is defined as a condition where less than 200,000 people in the United States suffer from that particular disease. But it's not as rare as we think. 25 million Americans suffer with some form of rare disease. From an isolation and loneliness perspective, it is the edge case of social isolation and loneliness, because it is entirely possible that you might be the only one suffering that disease anywhere geographically near you. I work with a group right now with 19 people in the whole world that have that particular range. Obviously they're objectively isolated because they don't know anybody else who has that particular disease. So that's the work that we do today, and hopefully I'll have the ability to make some sort of connections with whatever question you might want to ask.
Yeah, so I have no doubt you will, Paulo. You're really great at answering questions. So could you just kind of talk a little bit more broadly about some of the trends we're seeing in technology, and then also where you're seeing the greatest opportunity for technologies that are really helping to facilitate social connection?
Sure. I could probably do this all day. There are 7 technologies or 7 trends that are happening right now. And I know you're all aware of it. The big one is agentic AI, and that's where AI actually independently does your task for you and completes it for you. So it's not generative AI, it actually completes the task for you. The implications for that I'll talk a little bit about the implications as well. Sorry. The implications of that is it does free us up from being able to do probably much more important thing. We do that from a rare disease perspective, where a lot of the administrative tasks that somebody has to do to be able to manage rare disease is just passed on to an agent. The agent does all of that for them, including contesting their medical bills, lowering your bills, dealing with insurance. So it gives them a lot of free time. So that's a positive thing. So the bad thing, I shouldn't say the bad thing, but the potential flip side of that as well is and we made some of the things that actually connect us are some of these mundane things that we do together, particularly, and not necessarily from a rare disease perspective, but from a work perspective, it's these collaborative tasks that we do that we ultimately just give up to AI to be able to complete for us. It may have an impact on the way we interact with each other and potentially decay the way us as humans continue to build our social connection muscle. So that's the first one.
Actually, ask a few questions around that, Paulo. So I think when we think about the opportunity of agentic AI and potentially substitution for individuals, we're also facing extreme workforce shortages, and we're also facing a lot of cutting out resources to programs. And so the ability to really think about how you can invest in those types of technologies in order to allow individuals to operate at the top of their capacity, whether that's a community health worker, a nurse, a physician, someone who's going into the home, delivering a meal, or a school teacher, really thinking about how you can empower those individuals to offload a lot of tasks that take up a lot of their time. And it's not necessarily the reason why they got into really mission-driven, meaningful work. I think provides a lot of opportunity for organizations to really deliver a better engagement with individuals. So that's one of the things that I think we're excited about, but also excited about it augmenting workforce as opposed to replacing workforce, because I think it's really important that we continue to have those in-person individuals who are working in direct service as we think about directing or addressing social connection and loneliness. And the other kind of element to that we'll talk a little bit down the road is resources and funding. So a lot of organizations are not funded to adopt and update their infrastructure to be able to use these solutions or have technical assistance to really understand how they could effectively integrate them into the workflows. So I think that's a really important thing for all of us to think about as we're advocating for technology solutions, that we're not just thinking about direct digital or technology interventions, but also thinking about how we're supporting community-based organizations in having the resources to update their infrastructure to be able to kind of increase capacity.
Yeah, totally agree. And that leads us kind of to the next technology trend, which is the AI reasoning models. ChatGPT introduced that VO1 models, we see the Gemini 2.5 today. And the reasoning models, in essence, are allows us to be able to, or allows the AI to think step by step in very, very complex tasks, step by step. So, which I think is obviously great in many ways and the work that we do, but also there are also some negative things that we need to think about as we do that. Many of these tools do it so well that they understand us better sometimes than the normal our normal relationships, and so we need to be concerned or at least cognizant of that, and does that ultimately have an impact on the way us as human beings care for each other. It's talked about that in New York City a couple weeks ago about how AI could potentially replace the way humans care for each other, and complex reasoning models allow us to be able to do that. The third big trend is AI in healthcare. The government today can actually take 90 billion interactions or 90 billion events that happen in their healthcare system and gather tremendous amounts of insight from that particular, using that technology. The great news for, especially from social isolation, some of the things we talked about from a policy perspective on prescriptive care or prescribing social connections, because you can identify these things much easier potentially and get those insights from all of these interactions. There's ramifications for other things, very positive ramifications. But the flip side of that is does it continue to dehumanize healthcare as well? So some consideration around that. Then my favorite trend that is happening today is quantum computing. 2025, you don't know, is the year of quantum computing officially, which is awesome. And our quantum computing error, our ability to be able to reduce errors with quantum computing is here, and it's real. And so the good news about that, obviously, is we solve a tremendous amount of complex problems with quantum computing, and it also gives us the possibility of having compute on all the time. So that means more technologies that we can implement because we require computing power. Some negatives in quantum computing, particularly the environment and the amount of resource that we take, but that's actually also a trend. A lot of our large organizations, the number one thing we all think about today is conservation, the proper use of these particular resources. I think that has great implications for social connections because it ultimately, with the always on type of environment, allow us to be able to potentially connect through the environment, connect through the ability to be able to use these resources together. The next one is kind of this post-quantum cryptography. We will be able to pretty much break everything from and solve very complex cryptography problems by 2030. That's not that far away. I never thought that was actually possible when I first started learning and when I started going to school. Be able to do it, I thought it was something very futuristic. And so what does that mean from a security perspective? We can now secure things that people are challenged with particularly online, which then gives us the ability to potentially become more open and become more vulnerable online because that is in fact protected. There is a flip side to that because we actually connect when we know when we have a shared distrust of something, and so there's always the flip side of that. And the last one I talked about is kind of this whole environmental component of it and the race towards being able to have much more sustainable computing models.
Thank you. So, I mean, one of the examples that Representative Ami talked about in his remarks was AI girlfriends, right? And this kind of substitution of addressing loneliness with like technology as the answer and not necessarily facilitating that human connection. So can you talk a little bit more about like what is people care.ai's approach, and as you think about that, and then maybe where you see some of the greatest opportunities in leveraging these trends and these tools to build connection, as opposed to really thinking about like building your chatbot friend and like that's how we're gonna solve loneliness.
Yeah, I mean, it actually comes out to be what we call designing for connection. And it's a framework that we use, and I hope more organizations use it, where what we actually try to do from an objective perspective is how do we actually measure the ability of somebody to be able to access these resources and connect with other people. That's in rare disease, that is life or death, whether or not you can connect with somebody else, and the outcomes of somebody who connects with and has a community to connect with is significant. Not just for the person suffering from their rare disease, but also from the caregiver, because in rare disease, about 50% of those that have rare disease are actually children under 5. So the burden of that is actually with their parents and their caregivers, and their need for them to be able to connect. So in our design, we are always designing to figure out exactly how do we measure that a person is now able to actually have it isn't about the number of clicks, and it isn't about, okay, I use this particular AI and our AI agents were able to solve that particular problem, or coordinate your care a little bit quicker than gave you 16 hours back of your life. That isn't just the only thing to measure. We obviously want to measure that people are actually connecting and coming together. So we have to change the way we measure things from a technology perspective. It's not about engagement in terms of how many people went to a website, how many people read a particular article or watched the video or used a particular tool. How often they come back. Those are great metrics to have, and unfortunately, those are sometimes the only metrics, and those are the metrics that our venture capitalists like our investors care about, right? Is that particular growth, but we should think about it from a standpoint of what are we actually trying to achieve, and have those metrics published, right? And those are in fact designing for connection at the end of the day, particularly for very, very technology focused solutions that use AI heavily.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point you bring up in terms of the capital investment and how those metrics are driving a lot of what we're seeing in product development, and thinking about how does your business model actually impact how you're incentivizing certain behaviors. So when we think a lot of direct consumer products that have developed in the technology space, when we think about social media, a lot of it has focused on driving engagement, right? The more time you have on screen, the more time you're listening to something, the more opportunities there are to place those ads. There's those opportunities to really for those products to then sell to advertisers in order to build their revenue model. So we're not always incentivizing behaviors that are always creating the best outcomes for individuals. So can you talk a little bit more about opportunities you think about revisiting business models and financing solutions as we think about interventions for social isolation and social connection, and how that could really help change some of that product design and move us away from focusing directly on engagement, but really kind of moving from those outputs to outcomes that are really around public well-being and benefit.
Sure. Boy, there's a lot. So first, technology is not unfortunately fortunately, technology is not inherently evil. It's very, very neutral. And the way we legislate for it, or policy, or actually we regulate technology the same way we regulate tobacco, right? It's like, hey, don't do this. So we age gate a lot of different things. For instance, instead of looking at how we might actually optimize technology to get to the right outcomes that we want to achieve. I'll give you an example with notifications. We some of us, hate notifications, I hate them myself, but there, it's a really incredible tool. To be able to get your engagement, right, to be able to get your particular app you use a lot without notifications, we use them. But is it possible then to be able to design that, to be able to get out a positive outcome out of that particular notification? So those are some things that we want to consider. It's how do we start adjusting some of these tools? And I talked about kind of some of the regulation around age gates, and then saying, well, if you're under 13, you cannot sign up for TikTok and so forth and so on. I don't know all the rules specifically with some of the social apps that we have out there. And I don't know if that's good or bad. I don't know what their research says precisely about it. But again, I always think about when you design something as a technologist, what is the outcome or the objective you're actually at the end of the day trying to achieve? And just build metrics around those, right? And then measure those particular things. I would love to see regulation where we are looking at social networks potentially being able to report the number of people who use their platform that actually connected outside of their platform with each other. Like those are the type of things we should look at versus, you just can't use it because, it makes you depressed. So I'm not saying those are bad things. I'm just simply saying there's a balance in terms of how we look at our particular models and figure out how to get to the outcomes that we need and leverage technology to be able to do that. Yeah. I have a ton more from a healthcare perspective, particularly AI in healthcare. There frankly just aren't incentives to be able to use AI in healthcare. We developed technology that would be able to detect whether a person is having cognitive decline. We built for that. It's roughly about $12 a report, right? But if I have a nurse actually do that same assessment, we can bill at $240. So why would I want to be able to use the technology to do that when I get paid more if a nurse does it? And then the argument says, well, you can do a ton more if the AI does it for you, but I only have so many patients, right? I mean, so there's no way for me to leverage that from an economic perspective. So we need to look at some of these incentives as well from a business model and see how we might be able to improve that. Social prescription is another one. I know that we pushed that quite a bit. There's a great use case in ROI for social prescribing, and now I think are at the point specifically with AI that we can leverage that effectively to go beyond the traditional things that we might detect about somebody. That say, okay, maybe we need to, because I like gardening and Jeremy like gardening, so therefore let's get Jeremy and I to connect. We can go well beyond that in terms of how we find these hidden ways to connect people together. So those are just some examples of how we might be able to use it.
Yeah, no, those are great examples. And I think where we've seen some of the best innovation is in organizations that can fund direct interventions for social connection and have really invested in technology to do that. So like the Aging and Disability Networks are really early adopters, especially during the pandemic, in order to be able to invest in technology solutions for older adults and people with disabilities in the community, because through the Older Americans Act, you can use Title III funding to address social isolation. Through the Assistive Technology Act, you're able to really deploy assistive technology and think about a wide range of technologies that help enable individuals to be able to better engage in everyday life through augmentation for speech or closed captioning or other types of assisted devices that really enable people to participate in community. And so you've seen business models develop where entrepreneurs are working with those networks to really look towards outcomes-based approaches. And as we heard earlier on the panel, and as we think about healthcare, there is a real opportunity to really modernize some of the business models. So we heard about CPT codes that are available. So the updates to the physician fee schedule to be able to screen for the health related social needs. For principal illness navigation, for community health integration, where you can identify someone who might be socially isolated, but then we don't have the ability to actually have a payment mechanism to have an intervention delivered to address isolation and loneliness. So I think if we can begin to move in that direction and really think about how healthcare is helping to address these in proactive ways and really measure towards outcomes, we really could move past just these engagement models. So I'm really excited about that, the prospect of that and how these emerging technologies could help, be some of the solutions. So Paulo, with the last few minutes, kind of what other opportunities do you think from a policy perspective there are to really begin to move towards, having technology really facilitate real and meaningful connection and belonging?
Yeah, I may not have a ton of other policy approaches to it. I have just a ton of questions that I think people who have great policy should think about. One of my biggest questions is how do we use the question how we use technology and ask, are we actually using technology to amplify the human connections and the human agency, or are we trying to replace that? Right. I think that's something that policymakers should think about in terms of particularly on how we regulate some of this technology. I'm not much for regulation. I prefer that we provide more incentives to be able to do this. And then how do we use technology to actually bridge, specifically a lot of these powerful technologies, to be able to bridge the people together? I think that is something that we need to look at and how do we take away these particular barriers. And then kind of my last question is that's more of a it's a philosophical question perhaps, but it's if AI can understand us better than most humans, which rapidly getting that particular approach. So how do we make sure that we don't replace the very necessary and invaluable value of human connections, right? And it's not just about replacing that, but how do we make sure that we are not diminishing our muscle to be able to continue to have these particular connections. So those are not necessarily policy things, but I hope that people kind of ask these questions as they look at building policy.
Thank you, Paulo. I think those are really important questions, and I think it's been a really rich conversation. And I think what we've heard today is there are a lot of trends and rapid development in AI that is really going to disrupt every part of our life, whether that's work, whether that's how we engage socially with each other. And then, there is an opportunity to really think about and redesign how we're measuring outcomes related to technology solutions for social connection. And then there's opportunities to really think about what are some of those private partner or public-private partnerships that could be developed in order to incentivize, the positive development of technology to facilitate connection. And with that, actually, I have one last question for you, Paulo. Will you adopt an AI girlfriend?
That's a tough one. I think the AI girlfriend might reject me, so I'm gonna put the onus back on them.
Okay.
So.
Well, thank you for having this conversation, and thank you all for coming today. And
Fascinating discussion. I'm just glad that I met my beautiful wife before AI girlfriend. Really interesting discussion. Technology is such an important part of our work at the Action Network and at our sister organization. An entire pillar of our policy priorities are focused on technology. So lots of questions raised and answered, I think, in that discussion. And we look forward to working with a whole range of organizations who are focused on innovative technology to address the public health epidemic.